Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dr. Shayna Powell, and I'm a naturopathic doctor here in Montrose, Colorado, and I own West Elks Wellness. This week we're going to be talking about the Carroll Food Intolerance Evaluation, CFIE for short, or the Carroll method is something else I refer to it as. And my special guest this week is actually a patient of a colleague of mine who was tested for her Carroll food intolerance, and I use this something as in my practice. Most of my patients will get the Carroll if it's appropriate, and I'll have Dianne Murray introduce herself here in a moment. We met a few years ago back on Instagram, and she is a huge advocate for the Carroll method because it made such a difference in her and her family's life. And I'll talk about specifically what it is. It's not an allergy, it's an intolerance, and there is a difference there. And I want to make sure that we're clear on that because immunologically, it matters that we understand the semantics of things. Thanks for joining us today, Dianne. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm retired and I did graduate as a civil engineer, so I do feel like I look at everything from a very scientific evaluation. And I've been so fortunate to get the Carroll method, and I am an advocate. And I do thank you so much for having me on, allowing me to share my story. And we have been friends for like about 4 years. And a social media shout out. I put on Facebook, does anybody know a good stomach doctor? Because here I was, 52, with, um, I had the rosacea, the puffiness, I never could control my weight. I was always fighting that bulge. And um, yeah, even the meds, going to the dermatologist, nothing really cleaned it up. And I just grew up congested. I was mostly allergied up my whole life. And when you're allergied up, you just pick up every bug coming and going. And I
Absolutely.
didn't know what was wrong with me. And, it was hard to believe. And so when I put my shout out on the Facebook, my only answer was from a friend who said to go to her naturopathic doctor. And unbelievable here in Virginia that we had a Carroll Method doctor, because I do think you guys are scarce as hen's teeth. I
We
go
really
in,
are. There's maybe 10 of us in Colorado. There's not very many.
right, there's not but a handful in Virginia. And
Hmm.
so amazing. Honestly, my mom had just died, and I felt like her spirit had guided me to the solution. And she is who I dedicate all my work to about sharing on this test. She um, was a registered nurse in my hometown of Clifton Forge, Virginia, and she nursed her whole community for 60 plus years.
Wow.
So she, like a lot of healthcare people, were just sick and always looking for answers. And she was always bloated and kidney issues and asthma. And when I think back, her diet probably really wasn't what it should be, and full of the intolerant foods. And she was
Yeah.
just sick all her life. And finally, the melanoma, she died of melanoma at 79. So
Oh
kind of too
man,
young. And right
definitely.
after that, I found my Carroll Method doctor. So kind of a little miracle there.
Yeah.
And
So
um,
so I want to share with our listeners what the Carroll method food intolerance is because as I was alluding to, it's not an allergy test. Allergies actually have an immunological response in our body. Our immunoglobulins, our IgE, and sometimes our IgG, depending on how severe things have gotten in the body, can get fully activated. And so this is like the people that have anaphylactic shock when you open a bag of peanuts. That's an allergy, different
right,
reaction than what we're talking about here. What the food intolerances are, and so things like celiac disease, that's a gluten allergy. Okay. Probably man made to some degree with all the pesticides and whatnot we put on our food,
mhm,
but nonetheless created an immunological reaction. An intolerance, though, is you can eat the food, you may not feel great, but you're not going to necessarily, I'll say that necessarily, have an anaphylactic reaction. There are
right.
definitely cases that some of my mentors, Dr. Letitia Dick Cronenberg, who owns the oldest naturopathic clinic in the country in Spokane, Washington, Windrose. Um, I'll show you this website. if anybody is interested. Let me screen share really quick.
I love
Uh,
her. She is like, bow down.
yeah. She is. She is. And
Right her.
her father owned the clinic prior to her. She's the only one of her family that became a naturopathic doctor. And she started practice pretty young, like in her 20s. And so the Carroll method is named after Dr. OG or Otis G. Carroll. And he taught Harold Dick, her father. And so Dr. Tish has been one of my mentors, including Dr. Jared Zeff. And so those two kind of work together. Dr. Zeff weaseled his way into working with Dr. Tish's father to learn how to take better care of his patients. And what's really interesting about the Carroll, and this is the way I describe it to my patients, is it is an energetic food intolerance. So what I mean by that is if you put diesel in your gas car, does the gas car go? It sure doesn't. So for someone that has, like me, an egg intolerance, eggs are great food. They are full of great nutrients. They're full of choline and good fats. They have a little bit of protein. They taste good. They have a good texture, all these things. And for my body, it's like putting diesel into a gas engine. It does not work. It made me very, very sick. And, I'll share a little more of my story later on as we get going here. But I want people to really understand it's giving the body the wrong fuel. So the four most common intolerances in order that I see them clinically. Potato intolerant, very common. Actually, it's like 70% of my practice is potato intolerant. Um, Interesting, especially given that potato is not a common allergen. Yes, it's in the nightshade family. No, this is not a botanical family issue. Then dairy, then egg, and then fruit intolerant. There's a couple other ones like meat and mine salt. Um, uh, yeah, some smaller ones. I don't see those very frequently. I work in a really rural area, and so maybe I see more of like kind of salt of the earth folk rather than like I don't know. I've only had one meat and mine salt intolerant patient in my entire 8 years of doing the Carroll food intolerance. So not super super common at all. And you'd be surprised, actually, the fruit intolerant patients, the handful that I have had. I do something a little different than my colleagues and my mentors, is I want people to have that feedback of a reintroduction. Okay, you're going to eliminate these foods for 6 weeks to the best of your ability, and then I want you to reintroduce them and go full steam ahead 3 times a
Right.
day. I want you to eat them. I want you to take note then of how you feel mentally, emotionally, physically, your sleep, your skin, your poops, everything. I want to know all the details. And you don't have to tell me. It's so you can make that educated decision and say, "Hey, when I do X, Y, and Z, I feel terrible." And actually, out of all of my intolerant folks, my fruit intolerant patients are the least likely to do the reintroduction because they feel that much better, which is kind of crazy to me because I love fruit. We live in a really fruit oriented valley, lots of orchards out here. And I tend to feel bad for those people. But when you're dealing with a lot of chronic illness and you've been to this, that, and the other doctor, and you're not getting good answers, you're willing to pretty much do anything. And so, as weird as it may be, and I talk just like this to my patients about it. It's like, hey, I know this is weird and I don't care because it works. I am very scientifically oriented, but also we don't always have the answer. And despite the scientific method being a beautiful system for helping us determine if something is going to work out in our hypothesis or our theory, I am also humble to the fact that we don't get to know all the answers. And when I see something be clinically efficacious, I'm going for it. So Diane, I'd really love for you to kind of share a little bit more about your experience with the Carol, because I know, like me, it's been really profound for you.
It has been profound, and I like you just told more about the Carroll method than most people have ever heard anywhere. And when I started sharing like 12 years ago, I have two cousins that are DOs, Dr. Osteotherapy,
Yep, Doctor of Osteopathy.
opathy, thank you. And they're asking, well, who does the labs? All these typical questions that was just over my
Yeah,
head. And
yeah,
I tried to look on the internet, and there just wasn't any information. I actually I found, by you mentioned Dr. Letitia Dick Cronenberg and Dr. Zeff, oh my gosh, the top two naturopaths, in my opinion, in the world. They
yeah,
also teach at the Carroll Institute of Natural Healing. And even
Mhm.
on that page, they had very little information for the public. You could not
Yep.
figure it out. Now, I actually emailed Dr. Letitia, and finally she wrote me. I was like, hey, I'm trying to do a web, I'm trying to blog. You have no information, help me out here. And she did share that their test is not CLIA approved. It's and the FDA does not allow the naturopaths to advertise. And so I don't even
Mhm.
advertise. I could. I'm a private citizen, so I can say what I want. I do share on the web. I do not email you. Don't sell anything. So
Nope.
it's there for your information, and
Mhm.
it'll bug
Yeah.
you if you.
That point, I just want to reiterate, this is not a test, it's an evaluation. And the way
Right.
I use a machine, I run your blood sample, it's a simple finger prick test or
Yeah. So
simple finger prick, and I run it through my machine and compare it to my samples that I've got.
yeah, I use
And
the same.
Dr. Tish and Dr. Zeff have both been in trouble. Like CLIA owns CLIA. I forget what CLIA stands for. CLIA. Anybody in medicine will know what
It's
that
one
is.
of the certified labs.
Exactly. And so this is not a lab. You're not going to get a lab
Right.
write up with like the ups and down arrows and boxes. Like I give my patients a written handout. We're going to talk
Right.
about what I mean when I say potato. We're going to talk about what I mean when I say fruit plus
Oh
sugar.
yeah.
We're going to talk about it. And there's going to be words. There's not a graph.
Right.
People are like, well, how do you know that? And it's like, this is not an allergy test. This is an
Right.
intolerance evaluation. And so
And I
CLIA,
just
like,
love
we're
a
treading
few
carefully.
and just a few drops of blood on a piece of paper. It's the most
Mhm.
simple thing. And if you try to talk to your MDs about it, they're
They have
you know
no idea.
they'll have no idea.
No.
So I
And like
did
a
my
lot of things in naturopathic medicine, especially more traditional naturopathic medicine, which I would put the Carroll method in here. There's not a lot of information about it. You can Google all day long. You can even go to other search engines. You're not going to find a lot of information just because there is, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, a censorship agenda and a dominance in medical thinking. And
there
this
is.
falls outside of that category, unfortunately.
Right. I'm having fun with it because Google puts me on page one because there's nobody else talking about it. But so if
That's
anybody would make
awesome.
an inquiry, you're going to find my answers, and so that's kind of
Mhm.
fun. But it's also sad that that I would that no, you can't advertise. I think it's sad.
Yeah,
And
that's okay.
just
We spread the good word.
you're spreading a good word. So the symptoms I experienced was like I noticed I was eating, spaghetti, and I felt like I had a ball in my stomach. It was like, what? Besides, you already saw my picture, how bad I looked. Like, what is going
Mhm.
on? The rosacea, the bloated, followed by the gassiness, and the struggling with the weight management, the brain fog after lunch. And I can remember eating like a cracker pack of saltine crackers, not the whole pack, but a pretty good chunk of them. It'd be like, oh my gosh, this afternoon. And
Must be the salt, right? That's what a medical doctor would most likely say. It's you're just getting too much salt, that's why you're puffy.
yeah, yeah. And then I was sick more often than my peers and just always congested. And I took allergy medicines for like over 2 decades.
Oh my
Guess what?
gosh.
On no prescription. One was prescription and one over the counter. I know,
Very good.
yay. Think of the money. I
I
saved
mean,
on
I
that.
was in a similar state. I was taking 2 prescription anti-allergy medications, and then I was rotating depending on which antihistamine, Allegra, Zyrtec, or Claritin. Some
Right, right.
seasons one would work more than another. I mean, I literally lived off of those things and had
I
Benadryl as a
live
backup.
every day.
Yep,
But you
every
know
day.
what? It's never resolving it. It's just suppressing the symptoms. I now know the words.
Yep.
And I didn't know that before. And then when I would get sick, bronchitis was my jam. And
Oh,
boy, I like hadn't had that in over a decade, I'd say. And
how long
oh,
have you been
my tonsils
following your Carol?
like 12 years.
12 years. Yeah, I'm similar.
Yeah,
I think I'm like 8 or 9 years at this point, and God, so grateful.
so grateful to be alive and enjoy every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God for life.
Hmm.
And you know, I had the tonsils out when I was like 6 or something, and I kind of wish I had my tonsils back now. And
Yeah. Sometimes they
mono was,
grow back, but
and then I had that mono. I was out of school for months. I was just sick.
yeah.
And um, so I'm forever grateful. And my, I did get some difficult Carroll method results, and it shocks a lot of people to think about it. But I'm gluten intolerant. I'm dairy intolerant. So that explained a lot. I grew up on Captain Crunch, like, come on. And
There you go.
um,
Double whammy.
then and then everybody's usually, most of my friends only have one primary, but I got two. The ones of us who are sicker usually have two, it seems like. And
Yeah.
then I had the fruit and sugar intolerance, and that doesn't seem to bother as many people as me, but it does. And I have learned now about the reactive sugars and the neutral sugars, and I can mix my neutral sugars. For me, my favorite are date sugar and maple syrup, and they're a little more expensive, but you know what? You just don't need so much. You need so little,
It's
and
true.
I find it worth it. But I cleaned all that up, and it was just great. And here it's like I immediately felt better. I mean, the bloating's gone, the gaseousness gone, and then even my friends could see I had that healthy glow, and
Mm.
not from roast. And
Mhm.
I would definitely got commented on it, and then the pounds just come off.
Yeah.
And I did change my diet. I ate more organic. I added the leafy greens. And at one point, I went heavy vegetarian, but we'll talk about that later. But that wasn't really working for me so much. And
Yeah.
just good elimination, and everything hitting on all the cylinders. And I just was less sick,
Yeah.
way less than I
The way I
said.
describe it is when we're eating, when we're putting the wrong fuel in our body, the body doesn't really know what to do with it. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to pile this up over here in the corner. And that corner might look like rosacea or constipation or diarrhea or mental illness or gas and bloating or whatever symptoms manifest themselves. Could be
Different for every.
epilepsy. It's different for everybody. That's what makes it so tricky to be like, oh yeah, your epilepsy is because you haven't had a brain injury, or is your epilepsy because you're eating the wrong food for your body, the wrong fuel. So then what happens? It's you get a buildup of something that we call toxemia, or your body is making it in response to you putting in the wrong fuel to your system. Okay. And then you stop eating that. You eliminate those things. You find out, oh my gosh, you're dairy and gluten intolerant. Actually, that's so interesting that you say that, Diane, because if someone is going to be gluten intolerant, I haven't had anyone that's just straight gluten intolerant. They're usually dairy and gluten intolerant at the same time,
Oh,
which is really an interesting. And I agree with you that people that have double primaries, I am also one of those people. I'm egg and peanut. Both of
oh,
which are the most common allergies in the world, though they're not allergies for me, they're
right.
intolerances. Um, and fruit and sugar is the most common combination. I would say, yeah, it's a landslide majority. Most common symptom there is gas and bloating, hands down. And then this other really weird symptom, it's like not difficulty breathing, but it's kind of like a band right around like the rib cage here. And if you get it, you're like, oh my God, that sensation is gone when they eliminate fruit and sugar. So you have this toxic buildup, the trash is piling up inside your body. While when you eliminate the foods, the body's like, oh, like I can play catch up now and start cleaning house in ways that it hasn't previously been able to, because it just if you're burdening the system every day all the time, you're eating potatoes 3 times a day, like you're never going to be able to actually take out the trash. The body is just trying to keep up with how much input it's getting. But when you give it the proper chance to clean up the house, that's when you start seeing the pounds come off. Your hair looks much better. You get that healthy glow. The puffiness dissipates. um, and that I wish I had more pictures from before I was egg free. And I did I felt so terrible that, who wants to have pictures taken when you don't feel well? So
Right.
I relate to that. And we're talking about this like it's an easy thing. And it takes an adjustment period to figure out what things have your intolerances in them. And you got to read labels. Like that's just the reality of our world anyway. We live in the United
Yeah.
States. You have to read a label. Sorry.
Yes, you do. I've read a lot of labels, and it's surprising, how much. Oh my gosh, I avoid a lot of foods. I would say it's a lot easier today to do my diet than it has 10 years ago, or even as a child.
Oh,
I don't know how. on it as a
Oh my
kid.
god, yeah, gluten-free now is so easy compared to
It,
exactly 10 years ago, and the tastes of things, they've really gotten the flour blends much better. Yeah, it's much easier now.
I can tell you, I can still eat, not eat so many of those gluten free things. Most of them aren't good for me either. All the starches and crap, and
Yeah,
I can eat a little rice, a little quinoa. I don't eat that many grains. I find it's really not my friend. But
yeah.
you know what? The Carroll method made me start listening to my body. It's telling you, are you
Mhm.
listening? And you know, the message is difficult to decipher. I would have never deciphered it without my Carroll method naturopathic doctor. And what else I love about the Carroll method is you have to go through the Carroll method, I mean, the Carroll Institute of Natural Healing, and they only accept licensed doctors. So if you have a Carroll method doctor, you know you have a licensed naturopathic doctor. So that's another benefit.
Yeah, yeah, not and what Diane is referring to is unlicensable naturopaths. These are folks that do not go to naturopathic medical school. They often don't even have a bachelor's degree, and there's a lot of them that practice in my home state of
Right,
Colorado, and quite a few. And they go straight up like there was a gal when I was in school in Florida, which like it's a felony or a misdemeanor. I can't remember in Florida to practice naturopathic medicine, and
it's not legal.
she did not even have a bachelor's degree and was calling herself a naturopathic doctor because she took a 6-month online course without
Right,
clinical hours. Yeah, sure, she may know some of the same things that Dr. Fleetwood and I know and learned, but
right,
to be able to medically understand, okay, these are the signs and symptoms someone is having a heart attack and you need to go to the emergency room, like that is what doctors do is they determine, okay, is this chronic illness? Is this an acute situation? What do we need to do here to get to the right step of how can we care for you? What Diane and I are talking about is chronic illness. We're not talking about someone that needs to be in the emergency room because they were just in a horrific car accident. A little bit
right,
different type of doctor, but still
right.
medical training, and we speak the same language. That's also very, very important. So, while I don't always agree that academia is the right way to go, it is very important that you get a licensed, or in Colorado we're not allowed to call ourselves licensed, we're registered, whatever. There's some political mumbo jumbo there, as there always is with someone that's coming in doing, again, slightly different perspective on healthcare. It's important that you know where the schools are, and so there is
Right.
school in Chicago, a school in Seattle, a school in San Diego, a school in Portland, a school in Puerto Rico, and a school in uh, Phoenix.
Connecticut.
And then there's two in Canada. Two in Canada. There used to be one in Connecticut, and they closed actually in
Oh, close the whole thing.
2019, I think. Yeah,
Oh,
Bridgeport. It just wasn't,
Bridget,
our profession kind of does this a little bit, a little
it's
waxing and
not big
waning.
on the coast. I see if you're in the PNW, there's a lot more natural healing
Yeah.
options than here on the East Coast. It's really
Yeah, I mean,
void.
there's really not many in Colorado either. I think there's maybe 150 of us that are practicing. And this, as you get further south, like Virginia's not licensed. Like
We're not.
there's
In fact, I
nope.
could be a naturopathic doctor, hang my shingle in Virginia, and they wouldn't say a word. And you know what? I would have more success myself than some people are having with their MD. Just because I'm going to say you need a naturopathic doctor and you need the test. I mean, you need to get your blood analyzed.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the
you're a good student in that, Diane, because you not only reach out to other naturopathic doctors on social media to inform them of your experience, which that's kind of how we met. You were like, "Hey, are you doing this? Because you really need to be if you're not." And then you also, like, for your own health, especially working with Dr. Fleetwood, who is a pistol and a half, of course. I love and
yeah,
appreciate her friendship and mentorship over the years. She teaches her patients how to take care of themselves, and that's a ripple
right,
effect. Like, you now are able to teach your family, and if your kids are
right.
adults and they have families, like, it's a ripple effect. Like, this is
It's
truly
a
the people's medicine.
It really is. And I also want to point out the U.S. Board of Education licensed a naturopath, just like medical doctors. So that's where the
Mm,
rest of that story. And
yeah.
a lot of research to get to the bottom of everything here. and we want to make it easy for you. And talk about my son, as a young teenager, he didn't want to do it, but finally the ziti skin and the boils and all that finally got to him. And he agreed to get the test finally. And he was just dairy intolerant. And then fruit and sugar. I feel, to me, that's one of the easiest ones you can get.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
so
yeah,
young.
fruit and sugar. Yeah, I mean, I have people just eliminate, and it's to be clear, it's cane sugar derivatives, so it's not all sugar, it's not fruit, it's fruit plus cane sugar. The way I describe it is grandma's apple pie.
Right, right. And the big
Unless she's
sugar.
using coconut sugar, probably should not have grandma's apple pie.
Right. And I love how you guys list, when you tell somebody that, you list everything, all the other names. I mean, you cannot find this other information on the internet besides here. And
No.
I've seen not as many results of you, but I have friends who are potato intolerant. Day one, they were so much better. One friend was eating like a sweet potato every day for lunch.
Yeah.
It seems like it's your favorite food. So I honestly tell people, look, it's probably something you eat every day. I'm gonna hate to tell you this. It's probably your
Yeah.
favorite food. And I don't know if this is true, but I did finally read somewhere that your favorite food, I don't know, it's if it's intolerant, it's gonna inflame your body. And then your body's making all this cortisol, and you like that feeling of cortisol. You like it. So
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy how your favorite stuff is really can be the worst
Yeah, and
culprit.
it's so funny because when I found out I was egg intolerant, I had just been living on an egg farm here locally, and I was also a baker. Like I've been baking since I was a little kid, and eggs, our traditional baked goods, almost always have eggs in them, and they add a certain fluffiness. And I was at that my ropes end with I'm a foodie person. I love food. That's like one of my
Me
favorite
too.
ways to experience cuisines and cultures is like, let me taste the food. And when I was dealing with all of my health issues, a lot of gut stuff, gas and bloating, mental emotional issues, the only food that I hadn't eliminated, I was eating like maybe 10 things, and I'm not even kidding. So I definitely had some disordered eating because everything was hurting me. The problem was is I was eating
Mm.
eggs every day, multiple times a day because they're an easy,
Oh,
inexpensive, decent source of good fats and
right.
protein.
The proteins, right.
And so I took egg out and immediately noticed a difference. Like I was like,
Right. It's
holy
immediate.
cow. It's like the whole world opened back up for me. All of the heartburn foods that I couldn't eat anymore, I could eat. I could have dairy again, I could have gluten again, I could have everything. And I was like, holy cow,
Wow.
this is insane. And this is where I think it's difficult for people, especially for folks that have been like, yeah, but tomatoes hurt me when I eat them. So there's this mental piece that we have to overcome. Um, for me, I didn't care because I had been so restricted for so long that I was like, well, and I actually was Dr. Fleetwood who ran my Carroll food intolerance when I was a student. And she told me, no, you should be able to eat everything else now. And so I started with, the things I miss the most. And Lord and behold, like I wasn't having a reaction to them and I felt much better. And when I unintentionally got exposed to egg after cutting it out, I wasn't planning on doing a reintroduction because I felt so much better. It
Me
was like a
either.
night and day difference. I got unintentionally exposed and I was at a conference and I had to go up to the hotel. Like I got knocked down. I felt so bad. I had to go lay down for a few hours. I missed the rest of that day's conference material, and woke up feeling kind of yucky the next day. Like I just didn't feel good, sluggish, inflamed. I didn't sleep well, etc. Pretty severe diarrhea, pretty severe anxiety. And I'll tell you, there's no amount of medications that I tried that took away the anxiety, like me getting off of the food that was, poisoning my system essentially.
Right.
And and I know you and I have talked about this. It's like I can choose to, okay, I went to a friend's wedding and wedding cakes generally have eggs in them. Um, and I can choose to have a piece of the cake and I'm okay. Like I don't feel terrible. I don't feel great, but I'm not bedridden. I'll tell you that. That's enough of my body has been able to take out the trash that having it periodically, and this is different people's sensitivity. I find like some people have like really severe sensitivity to their food intolerances, and mine was in the beginning. And as my body's been able to take out the trash, having them, once or twice a year, no big deal. And I'm grateful for that experience. And fruit and sugar used to really give me bad, bad, bad gas and bloating. And I always
Oh, yeah.
joke. I feel like jokes are make things so much easier when you're dealing with chronic
Yeah.
illness. I don't love agave syrup. Agave syrup is not considered a
I know.
cane sugar derivative. I call it hippie high fructose corn syrup. But you know where it's good at? Is in margaritas so that you don't have to mix fruit and sugar and so you can have your lemon lime margarita. And I'm not promoting drinking, but I'm just saying like
Right.
there's a time and a place for everything and it's okay, to think outside the
Right.
box. And I like the principle of 80/20. It's like we should be able to do most of the things that we need to take care of ourselves and then go to a friend's wedding and like not care. It should be okay.
uh, my girlfriends and I, my Carroll Method girlfriends and I say, if you stray, you pay. We don't hardly think it's worth. Most of us don't think it's worth it. For me,
Yeah.
if I stray, I'm going to get constipated and I will lose energy. Like you just might as well put me in the bed. I'm going to take a nap. I'm just
Yeah.
done. And the next day I will have zits. So it's just
Yep.
like,
See, and that's that
I'm going to
variable
pay
sensitivity,
every
that
time.
spectrum.
Right.
And so for
And
you knowing that, that's also really important. Like this is why I like to have people do a reintroduction is so they can determine, is it worth it?
right,
Is it not worth it? You've made the decision. The power's in your hands to decide how you're going to take care of yourself or not. I'll leave it up to
right.
you. That's not my job. That's your job.
And the fruit intolerance, I have friends with that. To me, that one's been really I think that's more difficult. I'll take, when you see somebody else's intolerances and you've lived yours, you're like, I'll just take mine and go home. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah,
And fruit
the
people
fruit and
really struggle. Some of them just
they
won't do it. I have seen that.
I have seen that too.
Yes.
There's people that get a little bit crotchety. I've had maybe a handful of fruit intolerant folks, and most of them have been like, actually, that makes sense. Like when I would go on a juice cleanse, I would feel like crap. Well, there you go. Or,
Right,
I was thinking that maybe my fruit smoothies in the morning were really affecting me. And then that patient eliminates them and they're like, whoa, like major game changer. And so,
right.
like I said, most of my fruit intolerant patients that actually go forward with the elimination, they don't reintroduce. And I know I've got a colleague that she is fruit intolerant and like she's like, it's not worth it. Um,
No.
I don't think Tish would approve of this, but one of the ways I had one patient one patient when I was a student who was fruit intolerant and they really did not want to do the full fruit elimination. And so I'm always trying to find ways to like work within a person's capacity. So if we can get a little traction, that's better than none in my mind. Um, and doing like the categories of the fruit. So like stone fruits or berries
Mhm.
or
Right.
the tropical fruits. And what I find, and I've talked with other Carroll practitioners, it's with fruit intolerance, it's usually one of four fruits, or sometimes all four of these, that are the most like aggravating to the person's system. Blueberries, strangely enough, lemon, coconut, and avocado. Which is so fascinating because those are all foods that are touted as superfoods and super good for you. And but again, if you're
Right.
putting diesel in a gas car, it doesn't matter. It's the
Right.
wrong fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the wine. Oh my God. It's bad for those people who enjoy that and who fruit
Yeah,
intolerant. But
wine's
I
fruit and
will think of
sugar. Yeah.
and my
Plus
main
go ahead.
I was just gonna say my main message is, you don't want to change, but I'm telling you, you give it 1 day, 3 days, you're gonna feel better. And your gut wants what you're feeding it. If you're feeding it all that sugar and junk, it's in those little microbes in there are screaming, feed me, feed me. And
Yeah.
actually, the best news is when you really do cut it for a few days, you're not going to crave. When your
Yeah.
gut changes over, the cravings will be gone. So
Yeah.
that's a nice thing. I don't really hardly crave anything anymore. So it's been really nice to feel satisfied after a meal and to feel energized. I mean, you should, like, if I eat a fish salad, it's like, um, I feel energy. I'm ready to go with greens and
Mhm.
all that. It's like power. And that's
Yeah.
how food should feel.
Yeah, energizing. And yeah, that's something a lot of people. So I'm almost due in my pregnancy, and I really haven't had any cravings. Like I am, I guess, one of those weird people that even as a kid loved broccoli. Like I've always loved like real foods. And so the cravings I've had, I was like craving citrus and strawberries. And it's like, oh, those are great sources of vitamin C. But nothing was like, oh my God, I have to have my Arby's, whatever. Like
Right.
and maybe this is like that changeover, but I've been egg free for 8, 9, God, yeah, 8 years now, I think. And I don't crave eggs. Like I don't know about you, but like when I have an egg thing, like especially if it's really eggy, I'm like, ooh, this doesn't taste good. Like it's like my body has come to the point where it's like, ooh, this is not the thing for you. You know what I mean? And so the body is just like, we don't need that anymore. And you're talking about cravings, and our gut microbiome
Oh,
is rapidly changing. Within 24 hours of you changing your
oh
diet,
wow.
your microbiome starts to turn over,
That
which is
is
very cool.
amazing.
The body is very adaptable.
Yeah, and some of the healing I've seen just with my family and friends, it's like, your skin, the breakouts are gone. Some people get really bad boils, gone. Some have
Mhm.
had eczema, like over potatoes or the dairy, gone. And you know what? They go to the dermatologist and taking all this medicine. They finally tell the dermatologist we stopped eating dairy and it went away. And the dermatologist say, yeah, we see that a lot. But they won't tell you up front.
No.
They're just going to give you the medications. That really does makes me sad. And a
Yeah.
couple of my asthma friends just like hardly have any asthma at all. It's like, isn't that really worth it? And most of my friends have lost, those extra pounds you just didn't need. It just comes off naturally. I don't diet, honestly. I've never dieted a day in my life. I just
Yeah.
never had capacity. But once I see the scientific results, and then I understand the feeling my body's telling me and see
Mhm.
what happens. I get it.
Yeah.
It's worth it and amazing, really. Oh, and I have to also say, my own eyesight, the last time I've been to the eye doctor, he keeps saying, well, your eyesight improved. Your eyesight, two times in a row, my eyesight improved.
Oh my
And that,
gosh, that's amazing.
it is amazing.
See, and
So,
that's the body. The body is finite, whether we like it or not. The soul is our infinite aspect of the human experience. However, by the time, and I'm 34, I have people that are younger than me that come to see me in my practice and are just like, yeah, it's just because I'm getting old. I'm 28 now. I'm like, you're 28. You shouldn't be feeling old. Like, what the heck? I
right.
have patients that are 50 that are like, oh my God, I'm so old. I'm like, you're not, my rule is you're not old until you're 85. And I've got patients in their 80s that are in better shape than my 28-year-old patients. It's like, what is that? And to
Yeah,
me, it's along the lines of the as we get older, like in our numbers, our age, we should learn more and learn how to better listen to our body and understand what our body's telling us and say, hey, you know what? Maybe CrossFit's not the right exercise for me. I'm glad it works really well for you. This is a better exercise for me. And that's something I've learned over time, right? It's like that's part of the aging process is learning what works for you. You know,
exactly.
the problem is like we can talk about industries that have been captured and that those aspects of things that politically have a stranglehold on our food system and the fact that drugs are like the only quote unquote way of treating illness scientifically and the capture of the scientific industry. How about that? Because I'll tell you
Right.
what, double blind randomized controlled placebo studies pretty much only work with medications. Like you can't put a piece of broccoli and say, oh, did this person eat broccoli or did this person not eat broccoli and have it
Right.
be a double blind randomized controlled trial? Like you can't do that. So the parameters on what is considered scientific and best quality evidence is rigged to basically only support pharmaceuticals. And, while the Carroll food intolerance is definitely weird, I will give people that. It's weird. And, you know, the one piece that I don't like about it, and I just like to be honest because I feel like that's just honesty is the best policy, is if you go see another Carroll intolerance practitioner and they run it and they didn't know that you had a sample run already, they can get a different result than you. And we're getting into some like quantum layers of things that I don't even fully understand because I'm a lowly biologist, not a physicist. Um, I'm okay with that though, because the results I see, I don't care. Like there's only I'm hoping people are grasping that like some things are out of our capacity to understand and
Right.
to be humble to the wisdom that is being offered. And I know my story, Diane has a similar story, and I mean I've seen crazy things happen when people avoid their Carroll. And I'm
Oh, yeah.
like, how is this possible? Like this is something that I was told was, this is you're going to have for the rest of your life. All of my health conditions, asthma, allergies, eczema,
Right. And all the pills.
anxiety, all of it, you're going to have for the rest of your life. Too bad, so sad. Really? You're going to have
Right.
IBS and SIBO for the rest of your life. Too bad, so sad. Really? I don't have any of those problems now. Huh, weird.
Yeah.
What happened? And I do
Yeah.
think that there is the biology of belief. What's the have you read that book, Diane? Bruce Lipton's
No,
book.
but I'll write that one down.
Oh, you should read it. You'll love it. It's such a good one.
Biology.
It explains vitalism, vitalistic naturopathic medicine so well. And what's crazy is he worked at a conventional medical school and he was like kind of booed out of the door. And he's a like I think he was a physiology teacher professor at a medical school, if I'm remembering correctly. Like his experiments that he did were very simple, which I love a good simple experiment. It's like his whole thought is like the environment impacts the organism. Your environment impacts your organism. So if you're eating the wrong foods, you're in a toxic marriage, you hate your job, your house maybe has mold in it or whatever the case is,
Right.
that's going to affect the quality of our life on a very profound and large way. I just got a message actually from a colleague of mine whose patient moved back to one of her hometown, divorced her husband, got a new job, et cetera, and all of her health conditions gone. Like these things are profound, and this person doesn't do the Carol, but that's besides the point. The point is their environment really impacts the quality of our life.
It does. And sleep and all the things. You guys have such great lifestyle advice, no doubt. And
Yeah.
I learned so much. And in fact, even after my Carol, I went to my doctor once a year, especially to get their blood results. And they were ready to put me on a statin. And
Mm.
hmm, thank God I was seeing a naturopath and I showed her my stuff. And she was like, well, why don't you try a little fish oil, a little algae, you know, product that's like a fish oil. And, I did that. And my, oh, I stopped eating French fries. Each one of
You
those were
know,
20 points. Those fries were 20 points. And then that fish oil or algae oil, whatever you prefer, was another 20 points. And well, I hadn't eaten statin since. And
fantastic.
dollar industry,
Yeah.
$1 trillion.
Yeah, statins, oh my gosh. And the fact that a lot of medical doctors don't know this about statins do not have the same benefit for women than they do for men as a primary prevention. And what that means is if you haven't had a stroke, a heart attack, or a TIA, what I call a baby stroke, a transient ischemic attack, um, there's no need for you to be like technically from a scientific quote unquote scientific perspective for you to be on a statin, and women just don't confer that same benefit that men do. And
Right,
this shows in the data. Like this isn't, this is following their
right.
scientific thought process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, even though I'd made all those changes for like over a decade, um, you should have seen how good I was at separating my fruit and sugar. I could eat
Hmm.
my fruit in the morning and my sugar in the evenings. And you know what the alcoholics say? I've eaten enough sugar to float a battleship. And
Oh.
paid for that probably with I have paid for that. And 2.5 years ago, my whole arm really broke out bad with cyst. That's what my body does. It makes a cyst. And, you look it up on
Yeah.
the internet, they just say they're benign, but, and it went
They
all the
look
way up
like
to my
they look like they
throat.
hurt.
It hurt a little bit. It didn't hurt that bad and it didn't itch, thank goodness. It wasn't as bad as it looked, but it was annoying. And I was going to a Carroll method doctor and now in hindsight, I realized she was at a clinic and um, they never asked your blood type. She didn't make any more dietary recommendations. Like she didn't ask me about my sugar, and they were just
Hmm.
like, "Well, you be doing this simple yoga. And I was already doing like power yoga and all this stuff. And after I talked to Dr. Fleetwood, I realized, oh, I'm not on the right path. I've been suffering with this cyst stuff for 2.5 years. It's not
Mhm.
healing, it's just going on and on. And finally, I went through the healing crisis. And that's what I call it. First, 2.5 years ago, I call it disease crisis because that's what you all write about, like in the book Serpent and the Butterfly and other books
Yeah.
too. And it left my arm, broke out in cysts, and a lot of it healed, but it still left a lot of cysts there. And again, saying they're benign, not to worry about them and all that, but they're bugging you. They're on your arm and all of that. And I
Yeah.
knew something was right. I couldn't quite figure out really what it was. And I'm so, I actually, but again, because of the social media, I have my little social media account, Gut Healing with Dianne. And all I do is follow the healthy crowd. I use it for in a healthy way, and I get motivated by those folks. And there's been some really strong voices out there about cut the sugar, cut the sugar, cut the sugar. So even my girlfriend cut the sugar, and I was still eating the boatload. And finally, I was like, oh, and I was eating a lot of chocolate, a dark chocolate. I thought was so good, very little sugar. In fact, that 85% chocolate has about half or way less sugar than even a 70% bar. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
But I got an article. I saw the articles about the heavy metals in dark chocolate, and I finally
Yeah.
realized after I'd had the breakout for a half a year, oh, it's the sugar. I got to stop it, and I did stop it. And nothing to be. You can always get people when they're sick, even me. And I finally stopped eating the sugar, but still, I still was left with those cysts. They just wouldn't heal, even though I had really made a big, serious correction to my diet. And even
Mhm.
my old Carroll method ND was at a clinic where they don't really do the hydrotherapy,
Yeah.
and I'm on a lot of supplements. And she was giving me a skin product to use that had mineral oil in it, a petroleum
Ooh.
product. I
Boo.
did that for over 2 years, and I wasn't getting the healing. And honestly, you couldn't believe it, but Dr. Fleetwood called me because we had a little Zoom call just to chat. She knew I did the web, and she was president of the Natural Medicine Institute, and I had joined pre-COVID because I was following Dr. Letitia Dick there and Dr.
Cool.
Zeff. I had
Yeah.
found and realized that was really good, but during COVID, you guys were so censored,
We
and
were
they
very
really
during COVID.
it's scary, and there wasn't hardly any that much information available to an associate member. Everything went behind closed doors. And so I
Yeah.
just hadn't renewed, and she asked me, said she was president, and asked me to renew, and we talked, and I was like,
You
she's in
found out
my
she
back.
was in Virginia.
I was like, I didn't even know she was in Virginia, and here I call myself an expert on these people. So oh, I didn't
She
even know.
sneakily moved back from Seattle back to
Yeah, she
Virginia.
sneaked back in, and I did see the announcement where she was president, but I didn't know who she was or she was in Virginia. And I finally realized, oh, I'm not with the right doctor. And I was aware of this thing called constitutional hydrotherapy because I've been reading these books, the
Mhm.
hydrotherapy book by Scene, and I was seeing a little bit of it, but I was like, I actually called my ND office. I was like, do y'all do that? Because she had offered it. I've been in this issue for 2 years that they don't offer it. And I was like, I need to switch. I need to switch. And so I went to Dr. Fleetwood just in May. And I had that mess on my arm really bad. It was way swollen. You saw a good picture. And it was a hot mess, let me tell you. And she gave me a little remedy. I think it was sulfur or something, and it just kind of took the red intense swelling away.
Nice.
And believe it or not, I already had the book. It's called Eat Right for Your Type by Dr. Peter D'Amato. And guess what? I found that book because on my social media, I was following one of your peers, Dr. Sam Price. And so she
Yep.
can't talk about the Carroll method. So she's talking about eat right for your blood type. And I got the book and I'm going through it. And my brain's like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new world. And this is right. Do I need to stop eating some of these avoid foods? So his work is based on blood type A, B, O, or the rare AB. And he has
Mhm.
scientifically tested each food for each type. And he's looking at the lectins. And
Yeah.
that's not what the Carroll method's about. It's not about lectins.
Different.
So
Yep. Different
he
approach.
can tell that in his test, he can visibly see that the wrong lectin for your blood type is in a, glu, a gluteation. I think I'm saying it
Yeah.
right.
Yep. You are. Yep. Agglutination.
A gluteation. And that means that it's forming a mass that you're not
Yeah.
digesting. And again, like who knows where that mass is depositing. I always call it your weakest spot is where it's going to hit. And
Mhm.
after I followed that book, and I've been following that for 6 months, and I went it in with my highlighter to her. I was like, come on, I can eat rhubarb. I can eat peanuts. Like, I'm loving some peanuts. And actually, that's what caused me to break out. I ate a whole party tin of peanuts, and I think it
Oh,
caused that last breakout. But I'm going to call it a healing crisis because this time it did go through the crisis mode, but I'm healing. It didn't leave me in
yeah.
a deceased state.
That's
And
good.
she's like, you guys, you really need to do this. And thank God I'm type O. So I did like to eat meat. And a couple of years ago, I was on a vegan diet and I told my naturopath, she was like fine with it. And there are a lot of healing stories and plenty of people on my blog that go vegan and it works for them. But I find it really
Totally.
works for me. A blood type A is a vegan person, and that's a diet they should lean to. And I'm seeing a lot of stories like if you're on your wrong blood type, you're probably going to end up with some kind of little or maybe chronic illness. And so, but Dr. Peter Amato is close on diet, and I find it's very scientific. But he is still missing these food intolerances, and
Yeah.
I'm classic O. Like he says, avoid wheat and dairy. I'm classic O. I'm that person. But I have friends who are O's. They're potato intolerant, and the sweet potato is supposed to be a beneficial food for O, not the
Yeah.
white potato, but the sweet potato. And so, what Dr. Fleetwood said is to overlay your Carroll food
Exactly.
knowledge over top of this blood type diet, and that will really hone you in. And I love it. I think it's personal diets for everybody. It gets you to your personal diet, what really
Mm.
works for you, what the right fuel is for your body. And now that I've been living that for like 6 months, I've had a whole meal of avoid foods, catfish and new potatoes. Like it doesn't drop you like your intolerances do. You're got energy and all that, but boy was I bloated and gassy. I was like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh. And just last week I just had a side dish of potatoes. It wasn't good the next morning when you go
Yeah.
down low.
I
It
and
was not
I
good. Oh my God, I
I
realize now. And the peanuts. Oh my God, I was about to kill myself on a peanut, I have to tell you.
peanut overload. Yeah,
And she's
so
like,
what
eat a
what
walnut. So
di
I'm eating walnuts.
what Diane is talking about is the food, or excuse me, the blood type diet. And we can get a little more complicated. And like, you're the classic O, my husband's a classic O as well. Does much better with pretty much no legumes, very few grains, great with meat and some fruit and some select vegetables. Like, and he feels so good when he sticks to it. Um, and what's really interesting is I'm a type A, so you would think I would do
Oh,
better with like a more vegetarian. However, I haven't tested myself for the secretor status, but I do not do well with a straight or strict vegetarian diet. Like I I I can't not eat meat. Like I don't feel well. And I definitely had that experience, especially when I was in school, because I was like seeing Dr. Fleetwood and like, okay, I'm going to try this. I think of everything as an experiment. And as I moved back home and started eating more meat again, and still, having poultry and fish and like, leaning more towards a well-rounded vegetarian, like a pesco vegetarian type approach, I was feeling a lot better having more animal-based product. So it does get a little tricky. And what I like about the overlay is it's like, again, that 80/20. It's like, okay, what are those chickpeas? Chickpeas are not good for anyone on the blood type in any of the blood types. And what's interesting to me is like folks in the Middle East, what do? They make hummus with it. They blend it up, they overcook them, blend it up, put lemon and olive oil to help make them be more digestible. So culturally, we need to look to other regions and see how they're handling these things intuitively without necessarily knowing that, oh, chickpeas are super high in lectins, for example. It's quite interesting. And briefly, we've only got a few more minutes here, but I want to kind of jump back to constitutional hydrotherapy because this is again another one of
You
those
took me
traditional modalities in naturopathic medicine. And there becomes a point like I offer it, I have the equipment in my office, but it's very laborious to do as a clinician, but it's necessary. So I get a call from a patient. She's done, this much testing. She's been on $1,000 a month in supplements. I'm like, you know what? The only thing that you haven't done is the thing that you really, really, really need. And you know what? You need some hydrotherapy. So I had everything set up, and I ended up developing a really good friendship with her over the course of our several packages of hydrotherapy we did. What constitutional hydrotherapy is you're connected to an electrical machine called a sine wave machine, and you're using a series of hot and cold towels. Um, and you want to do as hot as you can tolerate and as cold as you can tolerate. And cold as a person can tolerate, we have to take into consideration the person's vitality. If this is like a frail person that's really sick, lots of medications, a cooler towel is going to be better than a very cold towel, because the point is to get the body to warm that towel up. So you do a hot first, you do a refresher hot, and you put a cold towel on with the first sine wave, and you want to do that first sine wave right here at the two
Yeah.
scapula. Okay.
Right.
And then after about 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, if the towel on the chest isn't warm, then you're going to have them take off the wet towel, and you're going to do what's called transabdominal. So, like right above the belly button and on the back, right here.
Right.
And you're going to do that for another 10 minutes. What the electrical stimulation is doing is manually pumping the lymph and the blood to help change the constitution of the cells, help the cells take
Right.
out the trash and get fresh nutrients. It also really, a lot of times people will fall asleep. After you do that second round of e-stim, you flip them over like a pancake, and you do another round of hot towel, refresher hot, and a cold towel. And,
Yep.
if you're one of those people like me, when I first heard about the cold and I was just like, you're crazy. No, thank you. My teacher was like, how many of you guys hear about this cold? And you're like, absolutely not. Like 90% of the class raised their hand. He was like, then you guys really need it. So we really need to
Right.
be exposing ourselves. And I'm not saying you need to do cold plunges, at these 32 degrees like these crazy bros are doing, but exposing yourself to some cooler water at the end of your shower can make a really big difference for your immune system. And constitutional hydrotherapy, I have seen take people from a pretty dilapidated vitality and just gives them a little more vitality in their system, because we're helping support that body's natural process without
Right.
adding suppressive medications. And sometimes food is the answer, but food isn't always the answer for everything. And it sounds like constitutional hydrotherapy made a big difference for you, with
It,
getting rid of those cysts on your arms.
it did. I'm really proud to show it off today. You can see
Look at that.
where better
Yeah, that's fantastic.
is that. You can see where
Uh-huh.
it has. You look really close, but
Yep,
that's like
little
more
scarring.
months. And I'm lucky. I have the machine at home, and my husband
Yep.
used to work. My husband is a retired massage therapist and used to work in a chiropractor's office. They use another type of electrical stimulation. So she taught us how to do it at home. And I love that 40 minutes on the table. I still do it. It's heavenly. And it's meditation for me. And,
It
um,
it really is.
and that's what I found is like what you guys call yourself vitalists, because we have the vital force inside. We got to get it working, get it flowing. And
Mhm.
we have the best lifestyle advice to me. It's tapered for each individual. And I'll tell you, my family never was so happy when I finally got off of that vegetarian kick because we're all O's, especially my son. I'm like, I don't try. And we eat
Yep.
beef most days, or fish, and I'm really enjoying it. And
Yeah.
what
It
I
makes a
find is,
difference.
and what I love about the Vitalist is like, you will heal. And even though my mom had melanoma and her first piece of it was here, I was never afraid. And
Yeah.
nobody even biopsied it. It wasn't, it was all benign. I was fortunate, but I felt like after 2.5 years, if I hadn't have done something, it could have developed into something worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that proactive. One of the things we talk about in our profession is we have to arouse the individual to their highest level of responsibility. And it's like that's why I do the elimination and encourage that re-challenge so that you have the power. It's your choice. And I would love for you to do it exactly the way that I've done it, but you and I are not the same people. And
Right,
sometimes, and my husband will say this, it's like sometimes you got to get hit by a 2x4 or 4x6. And I'm a stubborn person and I need to see the evidence. And so like
right.
that's okay. And like that's just the way that I've oriented to the world. And I want other people to have that experience as well if they're open to it. And unfortunately, not everybody's willing to take that level of responsibility. It's so much easier to just like kick back and just be like, yeah, I'm just going to have my tricks and my milk
Big
and my soda
deal.
and and I'm minimizing it because I know there is access and there's other things that we need to take into consideration, but I've been there. I've been the 12 pack a day soda
Didn't
drinker. I've been
oh,
there. I know what it's like, and I know what it's like to crawl out of that hole of feeling like crap
yeah,
when you're taking 10 medications a day and you still aren't getting better and your doctor is telling you this is how you're going to live forever.
right.
Forever you're going to be on these medications. Well, what happened 50 years ago when we didn't have all these damn medications, huh? People weren't
Exactly.
so damn sick.
And if you
I'll
look
tell you what.
back, this hydrotherapy is so old. And I've read the book. Obviously, I have that one hydrotherapy book, and I see in Germany they don't even when they don't cold plunge your whole body. You can just do a leg or arm or
Arm.
whatever feels good to you.
And
We
it's
have
like
a
ingrained into their
I did
society. And in the bad towns, the bad blah blah blah. Sorry, I don't. I'm not terrible German pronunciator, but they have it incorporated into their communities. You can go and do stork walking. You can go and do arm baths in like the
right.
park.
That's what
Like it's part of their culture. We in the United States are just so busy rushing around and like, not taking time to support not only a community but also like a healthy lifestyle. We think we have to go to 32 degrees cold plunges. Like it doesn't have
right.
to be that extreme, people. And in fact,
No,
I
no,
think the 32 degrees is a little too extreme for most people.
it is. That's too extreme. But I do
Yeah.
see I've learned to love the cold. I'm like you. I didn't want to get cold. I love the cold. I love the cold towel. And
Yep.
I think it makes dopamine. I need it in my bloodstream.
It does. Well, after just like a few moments, it's literally like a couple breaths, you settle into that cold towel, and it's just like, ah, okay.
It's
Because the
heavenly.
it is the reaction the body is having is like, oh, there's something cold there. We got to go warm it up. So we just heated you up and we're taking this is us moving the blood. The body wants to warm that towel up. And this is the same thing with the cold, wet socks. And people are like, kids
Right.
would never do that. Kids actually love the cold, wet socks. No one wants to put a wet sock on their foot. I'm the first person to tell you that is the most horrid feeling in the world. But then you put a wool sock on over top when you're having a headache, when you're not feeling well, you've got a migraine, cough, cold, fever, any of that, it will help you break that fever safely without having to take NSAIDs or other forms of antipyretics to break that, to suppress that fever. Okay.
Right. I have
Um,
the suppression of symptoms is not the way to go. You got to work with your body. That's what I've learned from all my reading and studying.
yeah.
And your body will heal. Remove the
Yeah.
obstacle that cures your lung. Right
Well, Diane,
straight out of the
it's been fantastic chatting with you. And I always love getting to share patient experiences. And, you know, it's so cool that you've met a colleague and dear friend of mine, Dr. Fleetwood, and you've seen really good results. And she's teaching you how to care for yourself. So we've talked about the Carroll Food Intolerance Evaluation. If you want to get a little more information, although vague, the Carroll Institute I think it's .net. If you want to look for a licensed or registered naturopathic doctor, make sure they've gone to an accredited naturopathic school by the AANMC. And where can we find you, Dianne, if people want to get in touch with you?
I have a web, and it's called gutheal.net. So GUTHEAL.net. And I have a link there to Instagram, and I'm on Instagram, Gut Healing with Dianne. But my
Mm-hmm.
best advice is to find yourself a vitalist. A Carroll method doctor who is also a vitalist is the top of my list now. And um, what I went through, I think the universe still had some lessons to teach me, and I'm going to bring some more information on my web about some of my latest findings. And um, I just imagine a world where everyone knew their food intolerances and ate properly to nourish your body. Can you imagine the health and the
Oh my
wealth
God.
and the real vitality?
Yeah, it would be amazing. I would love to live in that world with you. Next episode will be a solo podcast, kind of my thoughts, things I've done that have been really helpful for um, helping me have a healthy, uneventful pregnancy so far. And I'll do a follow up once I have little dude and let you know how some of those experimental ideas that I have are going to go. I'm all about that experimentation and seeing. It's like, let's see, I've got plan A, B, and C, and I know that each kid is going to be different. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for joining us today, Diane. If you guys liked this episode, if you were interested, you want to find out more, how do you find a vitalist? Check out the show links. I've linked the Naturopathic Medicine Institute. That's my first place I look when I look where someone says, hey, I want a referral to a
Yeah.
naturopathic doctor. That's the place to look. And like and subscribe. That's how I get to help more people. Is one more person finds my page, and we get to chat, and they learn about the Carroll, for example, and it changes their life. So thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your day.